Hey everyone, this is Nate. I've also got Michael Duryea here on the show today, but today's not as much of a show as it is kind of some big news and a big announcement of what's been happening at Living Wealth and what's been happening in each of our lives. So I think what I'll do is I'll go through, I'll say quickly what's going on, and then Michael and I can spend some time talking about the future and what this means and how this all came about. But Michael, I guess I'll dive in.
Yeah, go for it.
And so,
good to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you. And so what's happened is the Lord has spoken to me, and he did it back in the middle of June, and he told me that I'm supposed to go into ministry. And I'll tell this a little bit more of this story, Michael, as the podcast goes on. But he called me into ministry, which honestly shouldn't surprise me or anybody else because my grandfather was a pastor, my dad's a pastor.
Yep.
A lot of these things happen generationally, and I always knew in the back of my mind that I was like, Lord, I will continue to shepherd Living Wealth and to be its leader for as long as you want me. But if you call me out, I will go and I will follow you. And he did that back in June, and he called me and said, Nate, it's time for you to step out of Living Wealth and step down from being the president of Living Wealth and transition into ministry and to teach and preach and travel and do the things that God has called me to do. And it's all been very fresh, but there wasn't like the Lord saying, hey, I want you to figure everything out before you go. It was like, it's time to go. And I didn't feel free to just stick around until everything was, perfect. Because I think that's honestly when we like to follow the Lord. We like to have our plan established and a perfect everything happen. But then the Lord started to work in the situation, and that's where we bring here is essentially I'm announcing that I'll be stepping down as the president of Living Wealth and most of the insurance operations as of August 31st. And Michael, who is a total stud in the infinite banking world, is mentored under me and was mentored by Ray as well. I mean, he was the perfect fit, and he has taken it upon himself to continue the Living Wealth legacy and to continue all the things that made Living Wealth so special, whether it was under Ray, whether it was under me. And the Lord has given him a vision. And essentially, none of this was done lightly. None of this was done.
Yeah.
I mean, this has probably been the heaviest season of both of our lives. And the Lord was working both on Michael and me simultaneously. And to draw us to this end point, which is, Nate, it's time for you to step down, and it's time for Michael to step up. And I think it was in my flesh that I was trying to find out a way to not fully step out. I think we all would have rather I stay and I, just build leadership team and I keep one foot in that door and then one foot in the ministry door. And God told me just point blank. And if you want to know the details of the story, I'm happy to share a testimony. I actually preached on Sunday at our church and various things. I mean, I'm happy to anybody who wants to kind of know more about the details, that's fine. But at the end of the day, the Lord kind of slammed that door shut and said, Nate, it will take you no faith to keep to keep one foot in the Living Wealth door and one foot in ministry. I'm asking you to go all in on what I'm telling you to do. And so that's where we're at. So all that to say, I mean, Michael, I wanted to give you a chance too, but essentially Michael's going to be taking over as the president. He's going to be the one who continues the ministry of Living Wealth to the world, continuing servicing policyholders, building a team, growing the business, doing all the things that Living Wealth is all about. It's just for whatever reason, the Lord has called me to step out.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate first of all, I just really appreciate your support and your help through all this, Nate. And Nate and I have had so many conversations about this. I mean, I've lost count of how much we've talked about this in the last few months about, originally the original plan of you staying on as the president and building a team. I was going to continue to be head of sales and recruiting new salespeople. And, that's what I really wanted too. I wanted to let Nate and the family and Holly and Jody and everybody, run the business. And I was just going to continue to thrive in what I love to do, which is helping clients and helping agents help their clients, and I love that. And I love doing that. And of course I'll continue to do that. But through a long process too, God showed me that wasn't what he had for me either. And again, we're happy to share more details about all the details of how that happened. I'm sure we could talk for 4 hours.
We
easily,
could.
Probably.
We have before talked for 4 hours.
Yes,
about this.
that's right. So, but this isn't going to be like a Joe Rogan length podcast. We're not going to, we're not going to talk for 4 hours about it. And we would be happy to do that. But in essentially just the timing, just the precise timing of God showed this to Holly, and then he showed this to Nate, and then he showed this to Michael, and then he showed this to, and how it all just kind of came up to really to this point where we're making this announcement.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, the Lord, he gives grace for certain seasons. And I think everyone who's a client of ours understood that Ray was supposed to be doing what he was doing.
Yes.
And that Nate was supposed to be doing what he was doing. But for whatever reason, the Lord has stopped, and he has said, Nate, it's time for you to move on to what I'm actually calling you to do. And to be honest with you, I was a relative success, in the infinite banking world. Well sought after. Everyone, loved my content, loved my teaching, and I loved to do it. Yep. But the Lord essentially
Including
told me, and the Lord told me it's time to take the gift I gave you and use it, for the kingdom of God primarily, as opposed to staying here. And I wanted to be able to do that. I thought I was going to be allowed by God to do that with 1 foot in and 1 foot, in ministry, 1 foot at Living Wealth. And the Lord said, Nate, if you do it that way, it will not be blessed because it requires no faith. And he said, what I really want you to do is grow in faith. And that was his call, to ministry, was when he spoke to me. I never had heard God speak the way he spoke to me back. It was actually Father's Day.
Oh, wow.
It was on Father's Day. I was sitting in church. I was minding my own business,
right.
essentially.
You did tell me it was Father's Day. I had forgotten that piece. It's incredible.
And I was just sitting here listening to a sermon. It had nothing to do with any of this. And the Lord spoke to me and said, Nate, your mission is to help people unlock their potential by growing in faith. And it was that sentence. And that was when he was calling me to ministry. He said, nobody will ever become who they're supposed to be, the version of themselves that I see, if they refuse to grow in faith. If you get complacent and here was the kicker that really kind of started to slam the door on me sticking around, was he said, Nate, you can help people with money all you want, but if their money creates in them a lack of faith, then you haven't done your mission, Nate. That wasn't what I called you to do. And so with all of that being said, the Lord called me out, and he stepped me into ministry. And a lot of people ask, Nate, well, what is it? What are you going to do when you go into ministry? And I don't have the answer yet. I just know what I'm supposed to do, and I'm obeying. The first step is to step down and transition it to Michael. And everyone here, all the clients who may be concerned, essentially for everybody who saw what happened after Ray passed and how the Lord continued to be with Living Wealth and continued to bless Living Wealth. And, Living Wealth was still here to serve everybody during that time frame. I believe the same thing is going to happen here. And we ask for grace for the transition.
Yeah. But
deep down, we know that God's hand is in it, and the future will be brighter than the present. Of course, with any transition, there's going to be difficulty and a time frame that we ask grace from the clients to make all the transition work well. But nonetheless, that's essentially the news, is that Nate's stepping down, officially as of August 31st. And during this next month, Michael and I will spend a lot of time together focusing on the transition. We'll be shooting some podcast episodes together. We'll be doing some things just to allow everybody to get to know Michael more, who maybe doesn't, hasn't met him too much or whatever it is. But the Lord's hand has been on Michael ever since he joined this business. The Lord's hand's been on this business ever since Ray was running it, and I think it will continue to be.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I just really, the scripture passage that the Lord gave me when I started talking to Nate about this transition was in Psalm 127. One of the rare psalms that actually Solomon wrote, not David, but Solomon wrote. And Psalm 127 verse 1 says, unless the Lord builds the house, those who build it labor in vain. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the watchman stays awake in vain.
Yep.
And that I really believe, I mean, I know I heard that God spoke to me just like with Nate and said, this is Living Wealth's verse for the future. If you try to control this and you try to, control the outcome and, do everything that you can do to get the outcome that you would like to see individually, then the blessing won't be there and, you're going to be laboring in vain. But if you hand it over to me, if you hand it over to the Lord, if you listen for the Lord, have the conversations with Nate, have the conversations with Holly and Jody, have the conversations with the people around you, listen for the Lord, stay walking with the Lord, then God essentially is saying, I have a plan for everything. I have a plan for living wealth, for bringing living wealth into a future that is another verse in Ephesians that says, that is more than you could ask, think, or imagine. God has plans for living wealth that are more than we could even ask or think or imagine in our own minds, or even ask him in prayer. So we've been on this incredible journey where both Nate and I and Jody and Holly and everybody in the Living Wealth, team of where God has shown us practically and in real time the choice between continuing to try to control it for ourselves or handing it over to him.
Yeah.
And he's brought all of us on the team to this point where we are all totally ready and have taken real actual steps to just hand it over to him and let him do with Living Wealth what he wants to do. And then our job is to just be in obedience. I think it was your dad, Nate, that your dad was saying, I'm not in
management. I'm in labor. Yeah, that's one of the slogans.
Right.
Hey, we're not in management. We're in labor, and that's how you live your life whenever you serve the Lord. You're not in management. You don't get to make the decisions, and you don't even get to understand why. You just obey. We're in labor.
Yeah.
And that's what we're trying to do right now. And the honest truth is I thought I would always be doing infinite banking. I mean, I remember clients would ask me years ago, they're like, Nate, what's going to happen if you're not here? What's going to happen if you decide to leave or whatever it is? I'm like, well, I don't plan on leaving, of course. But it was funny is I often would say, well, unless the Lord calls me to ministry, I'm planning on staying. And that's exactly that's exactly what happened. And that's probably because I knew deep down at some point I think the Lord was going to call me out. And I think he was preparing that.
You know what I see when you say that, Nate? You ever remember those really old radios where you would turn the dial and that red thing would go back and forth on the, and it would, you have to keep going,
right?
Like trying to find the station. Like you saying, unless the Lord calls you to ministry, it's almost like that was the first crackle of waves of you turning into this new station in your life.
Exactly.
Like maybe it was kind of slowly came on a little bit. I had that image come to me when I was talking to Greg Cook recently, actually, about different things in life. I mean, it wasn't just Living Wealth. It was his family, some of the things that he's been going through, me. I mean, I had another child 2 weeks ago, all this stuff, and we were talking about. It's like kind of tuning into that radio station almost.
Yeah, and we wish we could hear clearly all the time. So, like, a lot of people are willing to obey the Lord. Like, everybody would say, well, yeah, if the Lord told me to leave my position, I would, of course, say yes. But what they really mean is if the Lord told them what they were going to be doing when they left, then of course they would say yes. But if the Lord literally just says, Nate, I want you to step down and go into ministry, and he doesn't tell you what that is, that was the whole point of the lesson for me. That's what he revealed. Like, the whole purpose was for me to grow in faith. And it doesn't really take faith. It doesn't take very much faith to leave if you already know what the end result's going to be, or at least you think you know. We all prefer to know. We all prefer to know what the end result's going to be. The Lord's saying that's not a life of faith. So with all that being said, Michael, I mean, that's the news. We're going to shoot a few more podcast episodes over the course of this month anyway, so I'm sure we'll bring up a lot more of this. But for right now, that's kind of the big announcement of the day. Living Wealth is still going to continue. The Living Wealth is still going to continue to serve clients. Michael's going to take the brunt, but there's going to be a team coming in with Michael as well of other advisors and other agents who want to carry this mission of infinite banking and financial freedom forward.
That's right.
And everyone will get served and the Lord's hand will be in it. That's what we absolutely know. I don't have anything to point people to. If people are interested in, like, Nate, well, we'd like to follow along with whatever your next step is. I don't have anywhere to point you to right now. But Michael, I do think at some point I'll have some sort of, opt-in somewhere. If you guys want to hop on an email list for me to email you, when I preach or, where I'm going to be at or whatever it is.
Right.
People can follow along. But other than that, yeah, you just stay tuned for that.
And I just want to say too, stay tuned really closely with Living Wealth. I mean, we're going to have local meetings. We're going to have, masterminds for you to attend in person if you want to. The podcast is going to continue. The office is open. The support staff is here, just like Nate said. God has started to reveal to us some of the things that are coming, and He's going to continue to do that. So stay tuned. Just like Nate said, there's a really exciting future awaiting everybody that God's in control of. So
yeah, and I feel like you get to tap in to what God is doing, dependent upon your attitude as He's shifting the sands. Yeah. And if you go into a bad attitude, you probably will get left by the wayside. If you enter in with joy, then you will receive the blessing that I think He has for the whole thing. So that was what I was asking at the beginning. Not that I'm sitting here in judgment. I'm just merely saying, Lord, present to the clients a level of grace as we transition. Show us grace, have a good attitude, understand that if the Lord is in it, it always ends well.
Yeah. Yep.
That's what happens. And it's whenever we actually refuse to listen to the Lord is when things start to end poorly.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
Well, thank you guys so much for being here. Thanks, Michael, for hopping on the show and announcing it. Yeah. And we will be back next week for more of a more traditional podcast. And, if you do have questions or thoughts, shoot us an email. Michael at livingwealth.com or Nate at livingwealth.com. Leave a comment on the YouTube page, that you're here listening on. We'll respond to that comment. And anyway, just bless everybody, and we'll be back next week.
All right. Thanks guys.
Nate.